So I was thinking about some things the other day. I saw this thread where somebody was talking about, Scottish witchcraft. If you're not on the land, you can't call yourself a Scottish witch. And I was like, that's cool. I understand where they're coming from, and I definitely do believe, to work with the spirits of the land, you must be on the land that those spirits live in. But it was kind of funny because they were like, this is a semi-closed practice and yada yada, and they were kind of crapping on people who, maybe like an American, myself, who's trying to connect with some of their roots and asking questions, and and they're like, we won't share our practice with you because you can't practice it because you're not in Scotland, because it's land-based. And they're like, but the only requirement is that you be on the land. And I think that makes sense to a lot of people, but here's the thing, right? So, the practices that are done by a peoples and a culture, they're shaped by the land. The land is also shaped by the people. And I do think it's fair to say you don't have to be of that ethnicity or whatever to partake in, land-based or dialogue with the land spirits and communicating with the land spirits. We're peoples who move and travel. I think it'd be absurd to say otherwise. However, it seems to be pretty childlike to think that you can't use the same techniques that you learn, that you use currently on the land that you live, travel elsewhere and use those same techniques and practices to talk to the spirits and communicate with the spirits of the land elsewhere. For example, previously I was in Washington and now I'm in Texas, but I use the same methods to communicate to the spirits of the land, and a big part of that is just showing my respect and then asking the land and those spirits for permission to be here, and you'll quickly find that you will be communicated with, and vice versa. You can communicate with and back and forth, and that's even though the environments are vastly different. So what I found kind of funny about this argument was, like, this person said, for example, if I leave Scotland, I'm no longer can call myself a Scottish witch. And they gave the example of, like, I went to England and those spirits didn't like me down there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, Scotland, England, I know there's cultural borders, but there's no huge difference there in, like, the spirits don't say, oh, you just crossed the border, like, we don't like you here. It really makes me question the authenticity of somebody's practice, and another person chimed in, was like, yeah, I went to Japan and those spirits didn't like me. I'm like, what? Maybe that's a barrier that you put up in your head, that your practice only works on this artificial geographic boundary that you've drawn on a map. Like, but that's not what I've seen in practice. And I don't consider myself a witch, although I do like to communicate, with the spirits that are on the land. And I've just found the same techniques and practices can work in a breadth of places. And so what I would encourage you to do, if you say it's a semi-closed practice because you want to keep your culture alive, would be, to share your practices with others that would be looking to get in touch with some of their heritage. Just explain to them that these may have to be modified. These techniques may have to be modified depending on the type of land you're living on and what spirits inhabit that land. It's not the same exact spirit that will be there, but the types of spirits that occupy the land will be similar, even if very geographically far apart, if that land is similar. If you're looking at mountainous, evergreen terrain, well, it's likely you're going to run into some of those same types of spirits anywhere on the planet that has mountainous, evergreen terrain. So yeah, just something to think about. I'd say those people are probably much more invested in keeping that culture and heritage alive, even than somebody maybe of a different heritage. Even if they live on the land, they might be less likely to for it to be maybe a running fad or something like that later on through their journey they'll move on to maybe things that connect more with them at a cultural and ethnic level. And again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to say any practice is off limits to anybody. It's not. It's just what I've seen, throughout my time, and my experiences is that you will connect more with the cultures and traditions of your heritage and ancestry, and then just the place you happen to live at the moment, unless that's a place it's just deeply driven into your heart as home. America is my home, and while it's weird when I go over to Europe, I find this odd sense of comfort, like it's kind of like visiting your grandparents' house, even if you never really lived there, it's a safe place, and that there's a lot you can probably learn from there. However, it's not your home now that your current really just your current inner being feels most attached to. And I think that's how it is for a lot of Americans. Like we want to connect with that old soul, with the grandparents back in Europe, but we also have a big geographical connection to this area, and that kind of brings up another point. People talking about like you not being Irish, English, blah blah blah, can't call yourself that. And I agree, it's kind of dumb in the modern sense to call yourself by a national identity that you're not. Although that being said, that's we're the peoples of our nations that did what the peoples of our nations have been doing for millennia. A lot of our ancestors, if you're European in origin, some were kind of forced. I've done a lot of ancestral research, and some of those people were essentially forced to come over for one reason or another, pay off debts, stay out of prison, whatever it was. But a big chunk of our more modern ancestry, they were the explorers, they were the traders, they were the the kind of people that were most likely to be those Viking-esque types of people that would explore the world, occupy new lands, um, and I think sometimes, our cousins back on the other side of the pond um, get a little bitter by the fact that we can still be in touch with our heritage from their side of the pond, but we also have this to connect to, um, and our heritage wasn't just a severed line. When we crossed the pond, we carried over all of that heritage. Whether it's Scottish, English, German, Irish, like we brought that heritage with us, and then it began to develop from that point into another culture. So it's funny when people say, you know you're not Scottish. I mean, you're right. We don't have the modern um, culture that you have in your country, but a lot of the old stuff that you don't think was brought over and then just developed in a different manner because we had influences from multiple countries coming together. We also, again, we were the the ragtag hardy explorers, adventurers, you know, and so the culture we shaped over here reflects that. Um, but does that mean that our gods um, and things like that didn't come? You know, we can't access them over here. I won't say they came with us. I'll say we don't have access to them over here. No, that's farcical. Of course, we have access to them and can communicate and dialogue with them in our very own way. And it doesn't have to be the same as what it was or what it is to modern people in, say, Germany or Sweden or Norway or whatever. And it doesn't have to be exactly as it was in the past, because things develop, things change. How you know if it's real is if it works for you, no matter what anybody else says. So yeah, I just encourage you to give that stuff a think. I encourage, no matter where you're at, to get in touch with your own personal heritage. I found for me, it was what I was seeking, and I was immediately able to connect. I'll just leave it at that. And while there are things that I take from local spirituality, Native American spirituality, the stuff I take from that is a lot of the land-based knowledge and working with those spirits. I don't claim it as my own, but I know that they've been communicating with these spirits for years and years. So getting to know the names and the identities that they've found have been here can be helpful, for me to communicate. Does that mean I can be a Native American witch? No, because I'm not Native American. Well, maybe just a wee bit, but that's not an identity, that's mine to claim. Just as if I moved, to Korea, I could never say I'm a Korean witch. I think, like I say, your ethnicity and stuff does play into that, and also being on the land, but you don't lose that. Like that culture that has developed within your practice, um, it it works wherever you go. Um, you could always call yourself a Scottish witch if you're a person of Scottish descent from Scotland and you travel anywhere else, because those same practices you use will work elsewhere, even though it's not the exact same. You might have to modify a few things. That's when you can learn from the local people, but you don't have to give up your identity. And it's an absurd thought to think that you cross an imaginary border and you have to change your whole identity, as far as or not your identity, but your practice. If it's a true practice, it will work. Have you noticed you don't get practitioners of voodoo magic just because they travel from, say, some of the islands up to New York City, that they think that it stops working? Because it doesn't, Anyway, food for thought is what it is. Do what you want to do, and help who you want to help, but stop getting so butthurt, or you'll just be mad and crying all the time, and probably in the end what you're doing isn't help preserve anything. It's not helping flourish anything. Culture is only broadened by sharing it. Practice is only broadened by sharing it. No culture has ever survived through a large process of never displaying it, never showcasing it with others, never sharing it. Things can probably be overshared, but definitely if they're undershared or not given to people that are fully invested in them, they're just not gonna be around. Now, I will say one thing: I don't think you can lose paganism. I think it's a spirit of your ancestors, of the land, and I think no matter how diminutive it becomes in the moment, it will always turn back around and flourish. And I think we're seeing that now. Just be nice if people weren't fighting about it so much. Everybody's got this, can't be my friend if you're their friend, or if you talk to them, you can't talk to me, and what? Stupid. But do what you want to do. I'll be out here connecting with the spirits of the land, no matter where I'm at.